Hi, this is Max Majeski. I'm with MJM Law Office in Eugene, Oregon, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about what is going to happen if you are convicted of a DUI, driving under the influence charge in Oregon. So that's really going to depend on your criminal history and how many aggravating factors occurred. And this is going to be a situation where either you go to trial and the jury finds you guilty, or you negotiate something with your attorney and you're going to go in for a sentencing hearing and the judge is going to sentence you up to the maximum penalties. But this is what is typical and reasonable and what I've usually seen on a DUI case. So first we'll talk about a first-time DUI case. Now, if you're not eligible for DUI diversion and you weren't able to beat the case at trial, well then maybe you're going to be sentenced for a DUI for your first time. Now this would count as a first time DUI conviction, even if you've previously done diversion, as long as you were successful in diversion. So there's some strict minimum penalties on a first time DUI conviction. First, there's the fine. That's going to be minimum $1,000 fine, but if you provided a breath sample or blood test that was 0.15% or greater, that's going to be a $2,000 minimum fine, and the court will usually only impose that minimum fine. There's also going to be a mandatory jail sentence. That is going to be minimum of 2 days jail, usually convert to about 4 days work crew or 80 hours community service. Realistically, the amount of jail that the prosecutor is going to ask for, like I said, will be depending on the case. How high was your blood alcohol level? Was there any dangerous or scary driving? Were there passengers in the car? Was there an accident? Was there an accident where somebody was injured? All of these things factor in. And then at a sentencing hearing, we would also talk a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, maybe have some character letters, maybe have some proof of that you've been engaged in treatment, some kind of mitigating factors to present to the court. But in general, on a first-time DUI conviction in Linn County, Oregon, you're going to see, or the surrounding areas, you're going to see something like maybe 3 or 4 days up to 7 days jail, usually eligible to do that on the work crew. Usually they're not going to require incarceration on a first-time conviction. Now, there's also going to be a license suspension. That's going to be a 1-year mandatory license suspension. That'll start at midnight the day that you're sentenced and run for 1 full year. You would be eligible to use a hardship license on that. And so that's for things like going to work, looking for work, going to your treatment classes. And they just expanded that this year, January of 2020. Now you can use a hardship license also for looking for groceries 1 day a week, taking kids to and from school, helping elderly parents, as well as routine medical appointments. So that's that 1-year license suspension, eligible for a hardship license. Now, there's also going to be a treatment component. Everybody convicted of a DUI has to do those classes that you're ordered to do on DUI diversion. That's going to be a minimum 90 days of classes, once a week, 1 to 2 hours each session, at a place like Willamette Family, Chrysalis, Ordinary Lane. There's a bunch of places that you can do that. You'll get random UAs at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end. And depending on the facts of your case and how you evaluate will depend on your level of treatment. It might be more than 3 or 4 months. It might be more than 1 day a week. That's going to kind of depend on what the evaluator thinks about how you're doing in relation to drugs and alcohol. You'll also be ordered to attend a victim impact panel. That's about a 2 or 3 hour presentation in the evening. You just have to do that once. You have to do that whether on diversion or any conviction. So what gets different if it's a multiple DUI conviction? So say you already were convicted of DUI, you're going in on a second conviction. Well, if that second conviction is within 5 years of the previous one, there's going to be a 3-year license suspension. If the second conviction time spread is more than 5 years, that'll just be another 1-year license suspension, again, and eligible for that hardship license. As far as fines go, the fines, same thing. It's going to be $2,000 if it's 0.15 or greater, or it's going to be $1,500 minimum because it's a second. And then you're going to also potentially would have to attend a victim impact panel. Now let's talk about what happens on a third time DUI conviction. Now this is when it can get very serious if it's a third or more And this can be any jurisdiction, any time frame looking back, then this will entail much stricter penalties and sanctions. Now, if it's a third conviction within 10 years, that's going to be a felony under the rules in Oregon, and you're going to be facing a minimum of 90 days in custody, not eligible for any alternative programs or any good time or any work release. And so that's a pretty serious jail sentence. Now, that would mean that the other DUIs within the last 10 years had to be in Oregon, valid convictions, or in another jurisdiction if it's what's considered a statutory counterpart. And we would take a look at whether those other convictions out of state did qualify as that. So we were looking at probably 90 days, potentially mandatory in custody if it's within 10 years, and if it's multiple DUIs, more than 3, anything above that, 6 months, a year plus. It'll just depend on the facts of your case. Now, as far as the fine, that's going to be a minimum $2,000 fine. Unless you are sentenced to a term of imprisonment, then the judge can waive that fine. There is also a major sanction having to do with your driver's license. It will be a lifetime revocation of your driving privileges in Oregon and your Oregon driving license. So what that means is that you're revoked. You cannot use a hardship license. However, in 10 years, as long as you don't have any driving while suspended or other kind of driving crimes, we can go in and petition the court to restore your driving privileges. There's also going to be a treatment component and the victim impact panel component, just like in the other convictions. So if you're being charged with a DUI, feel free to give us a call. We're here 24/7 to answer those phones, and we'd be happy to help you out.